It's Wednesday, the 22nd of April, 2020, day 41 of the new normal at Santa Monica College.
This is the Pandemic Podcast, your twice-a-week news and culture guide to surviving and thriving in the age of coronavirus. I'm Glenn Zucman.
And I'm Jackie Sedley. Happy Earth Day, Glenn.
Happy Earth Day. Are you getting outside today?
Yes, I think I need to for my sanity. How about yourself?
Yeah, I go for a walk every day, so probably like an hour and a half in the little hills around here.
Right,
Day
right.
41.
Day 41. How does that make you feel? Does that number feel accurate? Has time stopped for you entirely at this point?
It actually feels like about day 41, but let me give you another number, 131 days.
Until?
The first day of fall 2020 semester at Santa Monica College.
Ooh, okay. You know, it's hard to define how I feel about anything in the next 30, 60, 90, 120 days. I think in terms of the fall semester, it's especially hard because we don't know. We don't know what that looks like. We have no idea what anything looks like. And
Yeah,
it's only
I don't think anybody
131
knows, right? They're probably
days.
going to decide, who knows, June or something. But I'm assuming the administration is kind of in a wait and see mode, and they're probably obviously thinking and planning, but the decision is down the road, I assume.
Well, it's difficult because everyone is so off kilter right now that there really isn't a way to inform anybody, regardless of your authoritative position. That doesn't mean you know more or less. There's no way.
So personally, how do you like fall obviously might be face-to-face, it might be online, or it even could start online and then we feel safe enough to go face-to-face, or it could be the opposite, start face-to-face and then there's a second wave and we have to go online. How would you feel about any of those options? So
I am very much an extrovert. I thrive off of this in-person communication. And so
all the stuff you're not getting right now.
I thrive off of, yes, all of the stuff. I actually had not had human contact in 14 days until yesterday when I got to hold my baby nephew. So
how is the nephew doing?
He's great. Everybody is great over there. Definitely.
And he's like 3 weeks old now?
Mm-hmm. He's 3 weeks. Yes, I believe so. 3 or 4, 3 weeks. Yeah, he's great. Everybody's great. But it really made me realize that it's almost like a serotonin boost when I am with people and I am able to have that communication and that contact and that connection. And so thinking about having all the classes online in fall, I'm mixed because obviously whatever we have to do to keep this under control, I am all on board for. But at the same time, learning online can already be a bit difficult when the class is already organized as an online course, as are some that I was already taking this semester. So when a course that isn't necessarily meant to be online gets converted online, I don't know how engaging that would feel. And I also think that it comes down to, if classes are online, does that mean that kind of puts the assumption in my head that we would still be forced to stay indoors by that point? And that's a scary thought. If I could go out and live in the world and then have my classes online, that would be different.
So online class, but not home isolation would be like a much better scenario than this one.
Right. I think, well, wouldn't you agree that feeling like you can kind of have your cake and eat it too is a little bit more solidifying?
And honestly, there's nothing I'm dying to do. It's just like the luxury of going down the street and getting those cheap, delicious fish tacos. It's just stupid stuff like that to a certain degree. But
well, I was just talking to a friend about this, kind of pondering on what you've realized you miss, what you've realized you really want to take up that you never did and you took for granted, and the things that you're realizing you really don't miss all that much. Is there anything in any of those categories that has kind of come to you?
Well, actually, I was, speaking of contact and lack of contact, I wanted to ask you about dating.
What about dating?
Well, I wanted to ask if you're doing any. I guess I'll say for myself. So since it's not a 2-hour podcast, I will skip the whole mistakes of the past part, and I'll just specify that I'm currently single. So the beginning of the year, I signed up for, a couple online dating services, looked at a few profiles, sent a few messages, actually met with a couple people, saw them like maybe twice, and it wasn't quite what I was looking for, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't like weird. It was okay, and it was kind of like optimistic actually. And now doesn't really seem like a time to be meeting new people and going dating. So so that's a little bit unfortunate for me personally, but it also made me think about where people are in relationships. Are you single? Are you married for years? Are you anywhere in between? What if you just moved in with someone right before the pandemic isolation? That could be like really awesome if it's like, oh, we have all this time together and the relationship's growing so strong. Or if it's kind of not working out and there's friction, it could be like, when can I get out of this nightmare?
Right. You have to consider that people were living their lives very close to when all of this suddenly took a huge turn. And so a lot of people, I'm sure, were in already tight situations. I've spoken to a lot of different people about those circumstances, and I've heard very mixed responses to how this has treated them in that way.
So great for some people and definitely not great for other people.
I've heard a lot of interesting little tales. A couple people that I know had just started getting into a bit of disagreements with their significant other that they lived with, and then this happened and they have to face it. A lot of other people I know are realizing that they're grateful that it gives them a more positive look on their most recent breakup or whatever interaction they had. It is interesting because that is kind of another form of communication and connection. I think we don't necessarily take for granted, but sometimes you don't know what you got till it's gone. And in this time, a lot of people are ruminating on that.
Yeah. It's funny. I find myself constantly saying nobody expected this, that it came out so out of nowhere. And in some senses, that's true. If you think about, if we wanted to be prepared for risk here in Southern California, we probably would have thought about earthquakes, fires, stuff like that before we thought about pandemics. But then, of course, I watched like Bill Gates' 2015 TED Talk. I watched Steven Soderbergh's 2011 film Contagion. And people were totally thinking about this. We were just kind of blissfully, ignorant.
I think it's interesting you bring that up. I've been kind of thinking about that a lot, and how, I think we said this on another podcast, about how people watch these films like Contagion and they say, oh, we should have seen this coming. I think that it's more, it was fantastical. It was this creative dystopian world that people created in their imagination.
Like an asteroid's going to destroy the planet kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. They weren't looking at it as a realistic situation necessarily. I think maybe they were. I don't want to assume all of these directors and creatives weren't looking at this as some sort of prophecy. But when you watch these films, it seems like it's set in a world that we're supposed to feel detached from, connected enough, relatable enough, but not watching it as a precursor to what might happen. Do you agree? Do you feel like it is meant to be viewed as a warning sign?
I don't know. It's interesting, in Contagion, they're going on about that number R naught, which is such a big number, the number of people that you spread to. And when R naught is less than 1, it's kind of okay. As it goes higher than 1, it's bad. With flu, it's something, I don't know, like 1.2, 1.3. I think with this, it's maybe 3 something. So, but anyway, R naught is a big deal right now. And it was also in Contagion. So I noticed that, and it's like, oh, the film's fiction, but a number of the things they talk about are part of what's happening right now. And obviously the Bill Gates TED Talk, he was not doing fiction at all.
No, absolutely not. And it is interesting to kind of project this situation onto that world, right? Because then I have found myself, at least, watching movies and television shows recently and seeing people in contact, and it gives me a sense of anxiety sometimes. I'm like, why are you in the same room with all of those people? Not realizing that wasn't the context then. Who knows what it'll be after. But,
well, I was thinking about all those period dramas where, like, if it's a PBS or something, you have to watch 10 hours of people being stiff so they can kiss once at the very end. Mm-hmm. And we think of that as kind of their repressed social style, which to some degree probably it was, but it in fact was also about viruses and the lack of penicillin and so on. And so, part of that distance was the public health milieu at the time, and now we're kind of there. And yeah, you're right. I mean, how much touch is in our future it'll probably be different for everyone, but it's certainly going to be less for most people for a while.
It will be, and even with the habits we have of touching our face so much, I don't know why we do that. I'm not exactly sure if we really do it that much or we're just realizing it now, but even a couple of weeks ago when my sister was at the hospital giving birth, my brother-in-law told me that he was driving home from the hospital, and without thinking, he touched his face in the car and panicked and squirted hand sanitizer up his nostril. He was terrified. And so how long is that going to go on for, right? That is one of the most mind-boggling questions to me. I don't think we're going to live in fear forever, but are we going to be instant jerk reaction to do something when we accidentally touch our face in public?
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, again, in Contagion, they make that point about that. I think they say we touch our face like 3 to 5 times every minute.
Wow.
So we've covered dating, self-touching. Are you gaining weight or losing weight?
I have no idea. These are not things I focus on, really.
So you're neutral-ish.
Yes, I do know that I've been cooking more than ever before. I made a loaf of sourdough bread, actually, that did not cook through all the way, but the crust was delightful, and we are on an upward trend into getting that good loaf ready. I've made a couple kind of stews and bowls, fruits. I don't know. I'm kind of enjoying it. Are you feeling any more in touch with that culinary side of yourself?
Well, I already was kind of a tea nut to begin with. I just had some fantastic chai with homemade macadamia milk this morning, which is really good, actually. It's funny. My diet is like pretty basic right now. I eat a lot of nuts and I eat salads. So it's kind of almost a little bit austere. But I also, I'm an acolyte of Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who talks about time-restricted eating. So I try to eat all my food in like a 4 to 6 hour window every day. But I think so much about it now, even though I might be eating the same nuts I ate yesterday. It's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever. Food time. Let's, like the little rat in the cage. Let's go over and get our food pellets.
I think a lot of people are finding that their heads are going to places that maybe they didn't expect, whether that is, being more obsessive about certain behaviors, about how their body looks, about how they feel, about what they're doing with their life, about their career. And I don't want to say that that's healthy. It's never healthy to focus that much on yourself all the time. But I am hopeful that people will kind of take this time with themselves to learn more about themselves, pick up hobbies, and maybe work on the parts that aren't so constructive to their well-being. That's a hope, at least.
It's been interesting in this first handful of podcasts that we've done, how many of the people we've talked to have said that, obviously the virus is horrific and it's taken so many lives already, but that it's kind of afforded them, or maybe, if you're not starving financially and otherwise, it's afforded them the luxury of kind of reevaluating their life. And it's like, what do they want to be working on and how are they living? And it's been kind of a good chance to reflect in ways that maybe we don't normally take the time to reflect.
Exactly. And I think that that's a mix of sometimes intense thoughts and also kind of fun ones, right? My close friend Emma and I decided to start planning a 3 to 6 month excursion across the world.
Oh, wow.
An undetermined time. We've always talked about this, but there isn't a timeline because we obviously don't know when we'll be able to do that again, but we can sit in our imaginations, plan out a trip, feel like we're not stuck in our space, and then one day it will happen.
2023 is like free and clear.
Yep. That's,
you can bank
that's
on
my inkling
2023.
too. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, you sound good, Glenn. You look good. You dyed your hair. It's a new style going on.
Yeah, so apparently the shelves now, they're empty of toilet paper and Purell, but now apparently they're also empty of hair dye.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Between that and haircuts, buzzes, horror stories of parents trying to trim their kids' their kids'
Oh, I
looks.
hadn't heard
And
about that. Is that right?
yeah, I've had quite a few friends who are in fear of allowing their roommates or parents to cut their hair, but they don't see any other out right now. I personally don't feel that obsessive about my hair. I kind of let it do what it wants. I used to be terrified of haircuts until this year.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was like a safety blanket for me. I didn't want to lose it without realizing that it was very dead and not the best looking and thriving that it could be. So I got my one haircut. I'm relaxed, calm about all that, but
So
we'll see.
actually, you could cut your own hair pretty easily.
I probably could. I
So
probably could.
here's my pro tip. When your hair is short, it's hard to cut your own hair, but it's easy to dye your own hair.
Right.
When your hair is long, it's harder to dye your own hair, but it's easy
Mhm.
to cut your own hair.
This is a good point. It is. I wonder if that will continue happening with people or if there will be another trend. I'm curious to see as this time goes on what people start buying and doing in bulk.
Well, luckily for me, this house is filled with tea and it's filled with hair dye, so I don't really need to shop for like a year probably.
There we go. There we go. You are all set on that front.
So on Friday's show, we're going to check in with Benjamin Geyer, who's a techno musician in Berlin, and see what's
Amazing.
happening with him and check on the pandemic in Berlin.
It is great to hear about how different countries are doing things. I know that I believe it's Kosovo. My sister's close friend lives over there, and they're doing something along the lines of assigned 90-minute increments that different families in different neighborhoods are allowed to be outside. And other than that, they are inside.
Oh, wow.
I haven't fact checked this, but this is what I've heard. I've heard a lot of speculation, a lot of truth, a lot of probably misinformation about these restrictions, but it'll be interesting to talk to someone from Berlin. I have no idea how it's going out there.
So I think we'll find out on Friday, but I think he's, in addition to doing his music, he's teaching kindergarten. And I got the impression that was maybe still face-to-face, but that all other school was online. We'll find out Friday.
Did you see, I can't remember which country it was. It was Denmark, I believe, Finland. I really should have fact checked this first, but there is a country that is opening back up its schools and its communities. And it's kind of the first test subject. And I saw these photographs, I believe it was on the New York Times, of school children with their arms out, not standing any closer to their friends. And I realized that I think children very well might be the best to make this transition into the new normal, because if they're told, stay 6 feet apart from your friends, this is what you do if your desks are moved. It just is normal
for them, yeah.
It just is normal. They're set on it. They're like, hey, we can't do this. Adults are a little more stubborn. And so as we reintegrate, it'll be interesting to see which age groups too kind of jump on the bandwagon with what we should be doing.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned children. I have a big family, like, 100 cousins. And I would go to these big family Thanksgiving, Christmas parties. And half the time after the party, I would get cold, or not usually flu, but cold typically. And I realized that it's all these little nephews, nieces, like crawling all over you. Maybe especially because I don't have them in my own house. And so, it's just all these new germs. And so I've been a lot more careful at family gatherings. Obviously we didn't have Easter this year, but at those kinds of gatherings, and my rate of getting cold and flu has gone down.
That's a really good point. I fact checked myself. It is Denmark. And it would be interesting to think about, in addition to the children, the faculty and the parents, and how that could easily recirculate. It's a lot of interesting stuff to observe in store, starting with Berlin check-in on Friday.
Yeah. So any exciting plans for Thursday, or?
I actually get to leave my home a little bit more today. Another family member is out of quarantine, and I get to go see my dog. So I'm very excited about that. He's been quarantined with another family member.
Oh, okay.
My dogs don't live with me, but they are still mine. I grew up with them. I just moved away from them. And so I'm excited to get that companionship in that way too.
Well, you can report back on Friday.
I will, absolutely. Do you have any Thursday plans?
One day at a time.
One day at a time. Let's go with that.
But I'll probably be here, most likely.
Perfect. Absolutely. Well, then I will see you then.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Be safe, be well, and continue to express your humanity.
And check in with us every Wednesday and Friday for new episodes of the Pandemic Podcast.